One of the interesting things I just thought when you were speaking there was there's these concepts that I kind of try to identify in life where the objective nature of something is different to the subjective nature of something. And so like one I have is free will. Like we won't get into the free will debate because that could be a full hour episode, but just for the example of it, it's my opinion that objectively we don't have free will, but it's impossible for us to subjectively experience that lack of free will. And I think time almost is similar in that sense, in that experientially the only thing that's real is now, and everything else with regards to time is just something you're thinking about. Now, objectively, the past did happen, but it's impossible for you to objectively experience the past when it's already past.
Well, that's right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And in fact, I make the point that time travel is impossible because it's equivalent to you trying to open up your photo album and then put yourself into one of the pictures. Because that's the only thing that we can do. We live in the present moment, and that present moment is not one that's connected into the past other than by artifacts that we can find scattered around us in the present moment. You know, the pyramids, you know, the diaries, the photo albums that we have in our current now, those are our only records of past moments, assuming that we can organize them, you know, in a sequence that logically makes sense. And more often than not, in physics, that sequence is ordered according to the laws of entropy. That is to say, what we call time is nothing more than entropy increasing in the universe as the universe is expanding. And that direction is such that at the Big Bang, entropy was the lowest value, and currently it's in an intermediate value, and in the future it's going to be an even higher value. And all of our artifacts that we see around us are embedded in this entropic flow of information or states, as you would more properly say. The thing is that in relativity, there was this older idea. There are two sort of formulations of the big picture. One is called, let's see, you would call it eternalism, and the other one is called presentism. Presentism is the idea that only the present exists, okay, and that everything else is either a physical artifact from the past or it's an anticipation of what's going to happen in the next moment. And in presentism, you do have the option for free will, because the future is determined by essentially quantum mechanics and it's indeterminate. You can't go from the present into the future except in very, rough ways, because it's all determined by quantum mechanical probabilities. And within those probabilities, you have plenty of opportunity for free will. All right. In sort of the block universe model, which is eternalism, past, present, and future coexist. You would think of it as like if you take a watermelon and the long axis of the watermelon is time, all right, and the axis perpendicular to that is space, you can slice the watermelon, along its axis and get slices of watermelon. Each one of those slices would be a moment in time in space-time, all right? You're seeing the universe from this sort of outer perspective. That's not the way it works at all, because each one of those slices, time would have to be the same everywhere within space in that slice. And we know that that can't happen because everybody carries their own watch and their own clock called proper time, and you can't synchronize these things such that you know where everything is at the same instant, right? So we know that doesn't exist. And it's also in the eternalism idea where past, present, and future already exist. You can have time travel because those past moments still exist out there somewhere, somehow, but you also lose free will. It's completely annihilated because the future is already there. All right? Going from the present moment that you're experiencing, future is already laid out because the whole thing is formed all at once. That's what the block universe idea is, right? So in the block universe, you get time travel, but you also lose free will. In the presentism model, you lose time travel, but you have free will. And actually, the presentism model is the one that's sort of more in line with the way the world works as we understand it quantum mechanically. And I think, if you took a survey of physicists and astronomers, they would probably say that that's probably the way things work, although there's no real objective proof. So anyway, yeah.
Well, I've noted those two down because I've never heard the free will debate was something I looked into a lot when I did my master's in philosophy, and it was obviously I was looking into the philosophical arguments for it, but I've never heard a quantum physics argument for free will. So
it's the only place where you can have free will, and that's by adding quantum physics to the now moment, because that opens up the possibilities for future states not being completely determined by the current state. And in fact, the future state is literally a set of probabilities for any decision that you make now, and the branching tree of possible things that could result from that into the future. All right. So I'm definitely a presentist.
Mm-hmm. Figured.
The block universe was something that came up in the early part of the 20th century. People thought, oh yeah, space-time is out there. It's like, Newton's idea of space and time being sort of this absolute firm thing that's locked into place, and then we're just wiggling our way through it. With space-time, everybody is tracked along what's called a world line, which is their location in space and time within this construct we call space-time. So everybody is reduced to like a track. The atoms in this track had their beginning in the Big Bang, and the atoms in this track, after, we're gone, are going to become part of the environment, and then there'll be a future Earth that'll dissolve into gas, and then, far future. But every one of the atoms in our bodies, is on its own separate world line, and the bundle is what we call a particular individual or organism. But that bundle is very temporary. It starts at the birth and it ends at the death. And then after both of those, it fans out into the environment and things like that. So, I think that free will is a much more potent gauge, for how things work than just some abstract theory about how space-time works. And the older ideas didn't incorporate quantum mechanics into them anyway, so they didn't avail themselves of this idea of, there's a George Ellis in the UK, he speaks of the crystallizing space-time, or the crystallizing present. And that is that the past is basically records, diaries, photographs, monuments, geologic formations, distant stars that we see at the present moment. There's the future, which is a set of probabilities, okay? And the present moment represents the crystallization of those future moments into the current moment, which will then pass into a later or a more ancient sort of record that is predictable, right? So the present moment is sort of this boundary of crystallization of the uncertainty in the future, which with the definitiveness of the past, right? Once something is crystallized, it's become definite, and there it is over there. But in the future, it's still a set of probabilities that hasn't yet crystallized into something that's real. So now represents that strange boundary, that where this crystallization process happens. I kind of like the idea because mentally I have a better image of, fuzzy things crystallizing into a crystal and then becoming something you can pick up on, on the beach as a grain of sand, there it is right over there.
So are we thinking like all the kind of the sides of the crystal is all the probabilities coming to fruition almost into one full thing?
Why things are like that, we don't know. I mean, why don't things just stay quantum mechanical the whole way from past, present to the future? Why does there have to be this crystallization effect that translates the indeterminacy of things in the future into the hardcore, predictable reality of things that just happened? All right. It's an element of our existence. If it hadn't been there, we probably wouldn't be here conscious of it to talk about it, And that's the thing that really bedevils a lot of 21st century physics now, is that when we get to these very subtle and advanced topics and looking for meaning in things, it always comes back to our being here to observe them. And if things were different, we wouldn't be here to observe them. And so somehow, whether it's quantum mechanics or the way the physical laws seem to look, or this whole idea of the crystallizing now, it's all about us being here. And we are part of the explanation. We don't know what that part is, but clearly, if things were different, we wouldn't be here, and it would be a different universe. Generally, physicists, we don't really like to use this sort of anthropic principle because it doesn't seem to explain very much. It's like, in our American baseball, you run to third base, and you can see home base right over there. And then what do? You walk off the field, you go into the bunker, and you take a shower, you go home. That's what we feel the anthropic principle does to a lot of issues in physics. It lets us sort of bail out of looking for answers too early.
What is the anthropic principle, sorry?
The anthropic principle is the idea that if the certain physical constants, the behavior of certain physical laws that are fundamental to the physical world, if they were 1% different, we would not be here. Organic life would not exist. Stars would not exist. It would be a different universe. It would not be sentient. There would be nobody around to realize how different the world looks. So therefore, the fact that we are here and can remark on, how bizarre the constant of gravity is, 6.6 times 10 to the minus 11 Newton meters squared per kilogram squared. Why that number? Why not 7? Why not 15? Is because if any of those other possibilities had come into play, the Earth would not be here, the sun would not be here, we would not be here. So the fact that it's a weird number is just another way of saying that we are here as conscious beings able to register the fact that it's a weird number. So it's a kind of a circular kind of, I don't know. I would prefer seeing something that doesn't involve me as part of the answer. That's just my preference. Other people who are more into a holistic world, God bless them, would probably relish the idea that somehow we are so tied to the world that exists, through these subtle things that it just makes them feel more complete as conscious beings, Well, I can't say that that's a bad approach looking at it. It's just that professionally as a scientist, I'm standing on third base, and I really would like to give the momentum from going to those other two bases a little bit more time to build up before I go to the locker room and take a shower.